It was a crisp autumn evening, and the gaslights flickered in the foggy streets of London as Sherlock Holmes made his way to the address provided by the inventor of a strange device that claimed to be a time machine. As always, Holmes was skeptical of such claims, but he could not resist the opportunity to investigate such a unique and potentially groundbreaking invention. Upon arrival at the inventor's residence, Holmes was met with a tall, thin man with a balding head and an excited glint in his eye. The inventor introduced himself as Dr. Ambrose Witherspoon and led Holmes to a room filled with strange machinery and wires. "This is my life's work," Witherspoon said, beaming with pride. "A machine that can transport a person through time itself, and I am confident that it works." Holmes raised an eyebrow, studying the machine with a critical eye. "Fascinating," he said. "And how, pray tell, does it work?" Witherspoon launched into a technical explanation of the machine's workings, but Holmes quickly cut him off. "I understand the principle, Doctor. What I would like to see is a demonstration of the machine's capabilities." Witherspoon eagerly obliged, and Holmes watched with rapt attention as the inventor activated the machine and disappeared into thin air. Moments later, Witherspoon reappeared, a broad grin on his face. "Remarkable," Holmes muttered. "And you believe this device can transport a person to any point in time?" "With some limitations, of course," Witherspoon replied. "But yes, that is the theory." Holmes stroked his chin, deep in thought. "And what is it that you require of me, Doctor? Surely you have not called me here simply to witness your invention?" Witherspoon's expression turned serious. "I have reason to believe that my machine may have been used for nefarious purposes, Mr. Holmes. I have discovered evidence that someone has been tampering with the machine's controls and using it to alter history." Holmes leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Go on." Witherspoon explained that he had noticed subtle changes in historical records, as if events that should have happened had been altered or erased. He had attempted to investigate further, but had found evidence that his laboratory had been broken into and his notes stolen. "I need your help, Mr. Holmes," Witherspoon said, his voice urgent. "I must find out who is using my machine to alter history and stop them before irreparable damage is done, and checking for signs of tampering." As he worked, he couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement at the possibilities of time travel. Could he use the machine to solve some of his most perplexing cases or uncover new mysteries from the past? But such thoughts would have to wait. For now, he had a mystery to solve, and the fate of history itself may be at stake. As Sherlock Holmes continued his investigation into the mysterious use of Dr. Witherspoon's time machine, he was contacted by a wealthy collector of historical artifacts, Lord Archibald Pembroke. Lord Pembroke had recently acquired a priceless artifact from ancient Egypt, but it had gone missing from his collection, and he suspected foul play. Holmes listened intently as Lord Pembroke explained the details of the theft. The artifact, a small statue of the goddess Isis, had been kept in a secure room in Pembroke's mansion. The room had been locked, and the only people with access were Lord Pembroke himself and his trusted housekeeper, Mrs. Mary Whitmore. "I cannot imagine how it could have been taken without my knowledge," Lord Pembroke said, clearly distraught. "But I know that you have a reputation for solving even the most perplexing of cases, Mr. Holmes. Please, I implore you, find my beloved Isis and bring her home." Holmes assured Lord Pembroke that he would do everything in his power to recover the artifact, and set to work examining the scene of the theft. He studied the locks and examined the windows, but found no signs of forced entry. It was as if the thief had simply vanished into thin air. As he pondered the puzzle, Holmes remembered Dr. Witherspoon's time machine. Could it be possible that the thief had used the machine to travel back in time, steal the statue, and return to the present undetected? Holmes decided to pay another visit to Dr. Witherspoon, this time with Lord Pembroke in tow. Witherspoon greeted them warmly and listened as Lord Pembroke described the missing artifact. "I believe that the thief may have used your machine to travel back in time and steal the statue," Holmes said, his eyes fixed on Witherspoon. "Do you have any way of determining if the machine has been used recently?" Witherspoon nodded, leading them to a bank of monitors displaying a complex array of readings and measurements. "My machine leaves a unique energy signature whenever it is activated," he explained. "I can use this to track its usage." Witherspoon began manipulating dials and buttons, and after a few moments, a map appeared on the screen, with a blinking red dot indicating the location of the time machine. "It appears that the machine was activated in ancient Egypt, approximately 2 weeks ago," Witherspoon said, pointing to the map. "And it was only used once." Holmes and Lord Pembroke exchanged a look. "That must be when the thief took the statue," Lord Pembroke said, his voice filled with hope. Holmes turned to Witherspoon. "Can you use the machine to travel back to ancient Egypt, to the exact location where the statue was taken?" Witherspoon hesitated for a moment before nodding. "It is possible, but I must warn you, Mr. Holmes. Traveling back in time is not without risks. The slightest alteration to the past could have unforeseeable consequences." Holmes considered the warning before nodding resolutely. "I understand the risks, Doctor, but we must do everything in our power to recover the artifact and bring the thief to justice." With that, the three men made their way to the time machine, their hearts beating with excitement and trepidation. What mysteries and dangers lay ahead in ancient Egypt? And would they be able to recover the missing artifact before it was lost to history forever? The time machine hummed to life as Dr. Witherspoon manipulated the controls, and the three men were enveloped in a bright light. They closed their eyes against the blinding brightness, and when they opened them again, they found themselves standing in the midst of an ancient Egyptian bazaar. The market was a bustling, colorful hub of activity, with merchants hawking their wares and buyers haggling over prices. The scents of exotic spices and perfumes filled the air, and the sound of chanting and music echoed through the narrow streets. Holmes looked around, taking in his surroundings. He noted that they had arrived in the early morning hours, judging by the angle of the sun, and that they were likely in Thebes, a bustling city in ancient Egypt. "We must move quickly," Holmes said, gesturing for the others to follow him. "We have no time to waste." The three men made their way through the throngs of people, attracting curious glances as they went. They soon came to the Temple of Isis, where the statue had originally been housed. Holmes spoke with the temple priests, explaining their mission and asking for their help. The priests were initially skeptical of their story, but when Lord Pembroke showed them a photograph of the missing statue, their attitudes quickly changed. "It is indeed the statue of Isis," the high priest said, his voice filled with wonder. "We believed it had been lost to time." The priests agreed to assist Holmes and his companions in their search for the thief, and together they scoured the city, questioning merchants and searching for clues. They soon discovered that the thief was a notorious local criminal, known for his daring heists and clever disguises. With the help of the priests, Holmes and his companions tracked the thief to a nearby alleyway. They found him huddled in the shadows, examining the stolen statue with a greedy gleam in his eye. Holmes stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the thief. "I believe you have something that belongs to Lord Pembroke," he said, his voice cold and authoritative. The thief looked up, startled, and reached for a knife tucked into his belt. But Holmes was too quick for him. In a swift motion, he disarmed the thief and pinned him to the ground. "What do you want with the statue?" Lord Pembroke demanded, his voice filled with anger. The thief sneered. "Money, of course, what else?" Holmes shook his head. "You do not understand the true value of this artifact. It is not just a piece of gold or precious stone. It is a symbol of a civilization, a testament to the ingenuity and creativity of the human race." The thief rolled his eyes. "Save your lectures for someone who cares, Mr. Holmes. I'm just a thief after all." Holmes considered the thief's words before nodding thoughtfully. "Perhaps. But even thieves have a code of honor, do they not? A sense of right and wrong?" The thief hesitated before nodding. "I suppose so. What of it? Return the statue to its rightful owner, and I will see to it that you are not punished for your crime," Holmes said, his voice filled with conviction. "Do the right thing, and you will earn our respect." The thief considered the offer before nodding. He handed over the statue, and Holmes and his companions returned to the time machine, with the recovered artifact in tow. As they prepared to depart, Holmes turned to Lord Pembroke, a look of satisfaction on his face. "We have done it, my friend. The statue of Isis has been returned to its rightful place in history." Lord Pembroke nodded. As the time machine whirred to life, the group breathed a collective sigh of relief. They had successfully recovered the stolen statue of Isis from ancient Egypt and were now returning to the present day. As they emerged from the time machine, they were greeted by a cacophony of noise and activity. The bustling streets of London were a far cry from the dusty alleyways of ancient Thebes. Lord Pembroke beamed with joy as he clasped Holmes's hand. "You have truly outdone yourself this time, my dear Holmes. I am forever indebted to you." Holmes smiled wryly. "It was merely a matter of logic and deduction, my lord. Any trained detective could have done the same." But Lord Pembroke was not so easily convinced. "Nonsense, my friend. Your talents are unmatched, as always. I must insist on treating you to a fine dinner in celebration of our success." Holmes raised an eyebrow. "As you wish, my lord. But if I may make a suggestion, there is a new restaurant in town that I have been meaning to try." Lord Pembroke laughed heartily. "Ah, Holmes, always the detective. Very well, we shall go to this new establishment. But first, we must return the statue to its proper place in my collection." They made their way to Pembroke Manor, where the statue of Isis was placed on a pedestal in the Grand Hall. Lord Pembroke gazed upon it with awe, marveling at the artifact's beauty and historical significance. Holmes watched his friend with a mixture of amusement and admiration. Lord Pembroke was a wealthy man, but his love for antiquities went beyond mere financial gain. He was a true connoisseur of history and art, and Holmes respected him for it. As they prepared to depart for dinner, the telephone rang. Lord Pembroke answered it, his face growing grim as he listened to the voice on the other end. "What is it?" Holmes asked, sensing that something was amiss. "It's the police," Lord Pembroke said, his voice tense. "There has been a robbery at the British Museum. Several priceless artifacts have been stolen." Holmes's eyes narrowed as he listened to Lord Pembroke's description of the crime. "It sounds like the work of the same thief who took the statue of Isis," he said thoughtfully. "We must investigate at once." Lord Pembroke nodded. "Of course, my friend. I trust your instincts implicitly." They made their way to the British Museum, where a crowd of curious onlookers had gathered outside. The police were already on the scene, questioning witnesses and surveying the damage. Holmes took one look at the scene and knew that this was no ordinary burglary. The thief had taken great pains to avoid detection, using advanced tools and techniques to bypass the museum's security systems. But Holmes was undeterred. He knew that the key to solving the case lay in examining the stolen artifacts themselves, and with Lord Pembroke by his side, he was ready to do whatever it took to bring the thief to justice. Holmes and Lord Pembroke spent the next few days poring over the stolen artifacts, examining them with a keen eye for detail. Each piece held clues that could potentially lead them to the thief's identity. It was a grueling process, but Holmes was determined to see it through to the end. He knew that the thief was cunning and resourceful, but he was equally confident in his own abilities to catch them. Finally, after days of analyzing and cross-referencing, Holmes had a breakthrough. One of the stolen artifacts, a rare Babylonian tablet, had a unique symbol etched into its surface. It was a symbol that only a select few antiquities experts would recognize. Holmes immediately set out to interview these experts, eventually narrowing down his list to a single suspect, Professor Harold Wexler, a renowned archaeologist and expert in ancient Babylonian culture. The professor was known to have a keen interest in the stolen artifacts and had been seen lurking around the museum on the night of the burglary. Holmes was sure that he had found his man. But before he could confront the professor, he needed to gather more evidence. He and Lord Pembroke spent the next few days observing Wexler's movements, hoping to catch him in the act of attempting to sell the stolen artifacts. Their patience paid off. One evening, they spotted Wexler exiting a seedy pawn shop in the East End of London, carrying a small bundle under his arm. They followed him discreetly, keeping a safe distance as he made his way to a nearby warehouse. Holmes and Lord Pembroke watched as Wexler entered the warehouse, disappearing behind a heavy metal door. They waited anxiously, listening for any sounds from inside. Suddenly, they heard a faint creaking sound, followed by the unmistakable clink of metal against metal. Holmes sprang into action, sprinting towards the door and wrenching it open with all his might. Inside, they found Wexler surrounded by the stolen artifacts, his face twisted in a mixture of fear and anger. He brandished a knife, threatening to harm anyone who dared to approach him. But Holmes was undeterred. He advanced on Wexler, his eyes flashing with determination. "Put down the knife, Professor. Your game is up." Wexler hesitated for a moment, then slowly lowered the knife. "How did you know?" he asked, his voice hoarse with defeat. Holmes smiled wryly. "It was a matter of logic and deduction, as always. Your love for antiquities was your undoing, Professor. You simply couldn't resist the temptation to add these pieces to your own collection." Wexler hung his head in shame. "I suppose I always knew that I would be caught eventually, but the thrill of the chase was too much to resist." Holmes nodded, his expression softening slightly. "I understand the appeal, Professor, but the consequences of your actions were too great to ignore. You will have to face the full weight of the law." With that, Holmes and Lord Pembroke handed Wexler over to the authorities, ensuring that justice would be served. As they made their way back to Pembroke Manor, they reflected on the strange and exciting journey that had led them here. "You truly are a remarkable detective, Holmes," Lord Pembroke said, his voice full of admiration. "I don't know how I could ever repay you for all that you've done." Holmes smiled wryly. "There's no need for repayment, my lord. The satisfaction of solving a good case is reward enough for me." And with that, they parted ways, content in the knowledge that they had saved